Well, happy Easter. I want to read something to you that I want to start off with today, but I want you to make sure that you don't disengage. Like, I know how easy it is. You're sitting on your couch, you're relaxed, you're chilling out, right? And you're just watching this maybe on your phone or on a TV. And it'd be easy just to listen to my words and just kind of let them roll by, but I want you to engage. Now, listen, I'm not saying you have to jump up and cheer, although I'll expect our live audience to get excited about it. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to respond with the same emotion that's written into this. Listen to this. This is Jesus talking. Don't be afraid. I am the first and the last. I'm the living one. I died, but look, I'm alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and the grave. Those are victorious words, aren't they? I mean, that's really what we celebrate on Easter. We celebrate that Jesus died, yes, but that he rose again and that he holds the keys to sin and death. The truth is, that's what you expected to hear on Easter at church, right? In this place, at this specific time, you expected to hear Jesus came into town and was excited and everybody yelled, Hosanna, Hosanna. You expected to hear about the week that led up to it and Thursday when he washed the disciples' feet and they had the Last Supper together. And you expected to hear about his arrest. You expected to hear about him being captured and beaten and crucified. You expected to hear about the 3 days that went by. And you expected to hear about Mary showing up at the tomb and the stone was rolled away and the angel that says he's not here, why do you look? For the living among the dead. You expected to hear that whole story, didn't you? And it's really an expected story to hear at this place, at this time, in church, on Easter. But what you didn't expect to hear is somebody being real honest about this. That the truth and the power of this statement doesn't match the pain outside. I'm not just talking about outsiders. I'm not just talking about those people who don't go to church this morning. I'm talking about us. Like the pain that we experience outside of this moment, outside of this period, this time of like our worship service right now. The pain we're experiencing out there doesn't match the power that's proclaimed in this. Jesus says he holds the keys to death and the grave. He holds the keys to sin. He holds the keys to the power that all this stuff has over us. And we claim this triumph in this time on this day. But here's the thing. The stuff that we experience outside of there doesn't really match in here, right? And we don't want to admit that. We don't want to be honest. The fact that we experience like, this still hurts me so deeply. And we don't want to be honest about the fact that we still struggle through some of these things. But here's the truth. We all struggle in it. Even when I just read a handful of statements to you, I'm just going to make some categories of people. And I promise you, by the time I'm done with just a few of them, they're going to include every last one of us who's watching here and every single person who will attend the Journey on Sunday, including me. Many of them are multiples of me. Like for instance, here's the deal. Like there are lots of people who are listening to my voice, who are right now struggling through a bitter custody battle. And everything about you is wrapped up in it and angry and furious. And there's nothing about your life right now that feels like Jesus holds the keys to death and the grave and all that stuff. The power of that statement doesn't match the pain in your life. Or maybe you are right now nursing an addiction. And it feels like that addiction, it just holds the keys. Man, that whole thing, or maybe you know or care about someone or care for someone who's nursing an addiction. They're working through some stuff that is so painful and so deep, and it's hurt you so deeply and so badly. And it seems like you know the information that Jesus holds the keys over this stuff, that he's victorious and that it doesn't have power over you, but the pain you're experiencing out there doesn't match the power that I'm claiming in here. Or maybe every single time you look and turn the news on, it friggin' overwhelms you. It does me, right? I watch the news and I see what's going on in Ukraine and I'm like, wow, my mind is blown. Or I watch as people flood out of a subway tunnel in New York City because someone opened fire. Or I watch yet another person killed and harmed in some way or another. And it overwhelms me. It makes me feel like there's no control, like that this power of this statement down here doesn't match the pain that people experience out there. Or maybe you're just a little bit more like tactical with your fear. Maybe it's just real life. You're trying to eke out a living with an income that hasn't gone up, but groceries that have gone up 20%. Gas is up hundreds of percent, right? Like it's tripled in cost, and you're just overwhelmed by it. And it just seems like way too much to take. And you know that this information right here is true, right? You know that Jesus holds the keys to sin and the grave, and you know that there's just no victory, that your life, you know that information in your head. But the pain out there doesn't match the power represented in a statement like this. And it's the reality out there that makes the truth down here feel like one more religious platitude. One more thing that people say that I know is true for somebody, but it's not always true for me. And can I be honest with you? There are days when I feel the victory of Jesus in my life, when I feel the truth that statement is true. But there are days when I don't. There are days when I feel like we're knocking it out of the park and I'm walking closely with Jesus. And there are days where I go, man, where is he? And I want you to know something, that isn't just some religious platitude. It's not just some cheap plastic thing like an Easter egg, just cheap and plastic. It looks good on the outside, but it's empty on the inside. That's not what we mean when we read a statement like that. In fact, I want you to know something. If you've been around Journey at all, you know that our building, the place we worship, the place we gather, it's a little different looking. It's made out of plastic, but that's the only thing that's plastic around here. Because we want to be honest and real. And we're not claiming that this statement about Jesus is true because it's in the Bible. We think it's true and we think it's in the Bible, but we don't think it's true because it's in the Bible. That gives us some parts of it that give us more value, but the truth of it is to claim that it's true because it's in the Bible it's not real. That's not going to make it out to my life. It's true and it's in the Bible. And I believe it's true because it's in the Bible, but here's the deal. I don't believe that it's true solely because it's in the Bible. Here's why I believe it's true. We believe it's true because we're seeing it true. We're experiencing it. People who are going through rough custody battles right this minute, in our church, in our family, are finding the truth that Jesus holds the keys. Right, we're finding that it's true while we're watching the news and experiencing this overwhelm. I know people in our family who are going, yes, my faith is still strong. I have Jesus to lean on in this. We're finding it to be true in our real lives, not just because it's information on a page, but because it's real encouragement. I know people right this very minute who are struggling through their addiction, who are even right this minute in the care of long-term, short-term care facilities working through their steps, that are holding and basing their truth, their life on this truth. And I know that they're not just believing it because it's information on a page. They're believing it because it's true in their life. There are people I know right this minute who are just eking out a living, even though groceries are up 20% and everything's more expensive than it was. And they're not faltering under it and following it because they're not basing their information on something that's on a page. They're seeing it true in their life. Their life is not just a house of cards, and they're trying to lay the cross or lay this truth of Jesus on top of it, then it just crumbles. That's what happens, isn't it? We build this kind of house of cards of our life, and then we come to church, and the house is barely holding together, right? I mean, just like any house of cards, it can fall over at any second. And then we come to church and we hear something like that verse that I read you, where Jesus holds the keys to the grave. And we try to lay that on top of the house of cards. And it doesn't stand up because the truth of our life, the pain we experience in our life doesn't match the power and the weight of that. But it asks this question, doesn't it? What is it that those people have that maybe you and I are missing some days? What is it that those people who are finding that this to be true, this power that happens in their life even though they're in the middle of the addiction? What is it that they have that I don't? What is it that those people who are going through bitter custody battles, what is it that how they find faith and how they find power and comfort and peace in Jesus? How do they find that and I don't find it? What's the difference? I mean, I know the same information they know. I just was thinking about this growing up. I grew up in church, and I didn't really like going to what we called big church, you know. I liked going to kids' church because it was entertaining and it wasn't so boring. Going to big church was really, really boring. But those hymns that we sang, like the songs, maybe it was, you know, just one song or another that you might remember from being in or around church. And that's a big deal to me. I remember them, things like Amazing Grace or other ones. But there's one particular one that I just remind myself of a lot, to be honest. It's this one. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. That's where my hope it comes from. That's where when I find the peace that doesn't make sense, or what Scripture calls the peace that passes understanding, when I find peace in the middle of all the mess, it's because in that moment my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. See, we're not interested in giving you just one more religious platitude. We're interested in introducing you to a real person, not a platitude, the person of Jesus on whom our life can be built. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus and his righteousness, like putting my hope on it, not putting his hope on top of my mess. Do you get what I'm saying? That our life is like that house of cards built, and we try to come to church and lay a little bit of religion on top of it, and it doesn't match. It just doesn't stand up. But when we lay down our faith in Jesus as the foundation of our life, it changes everything. My mother-in-law and father-in-law are moving to Tennessee soon. It's been pretty crazy because, like, Sheila and I got married almost 26 years ago, and within a couple of years, right after our middle child, Michaela, was born 20-something years ago, we moved away. We moved to Ohio and then now to Tennessee, and so we haven't lived at home, in Chicagoland for 20 years. And it's always been kind of we trip back and forth to see my parents and Sheila's parents, and we hang out with them. My parents have since moved to Virginia, and my sister moved to Virginia, and my in-laws were the only ones, other than my sister-in-law and her husband, living in Northwest Indiana. But recently, my in-laws decided they were going to sell their house, move to Tennessee. And we were excited, right? And they recently listed their house, and like right now, everybody experiences it takes about 14 seconds to sell a home. But you know what's crazy is there's a lot of fear. Can you imagine? I mean, like, selling a house is easy. Buying a house, not so easy, right? Moving across the country to a place where you only know just your daughter and her husband and the grandkids. I mean, all the fear, all the anxiety that goes into that. So I texted Oli, my father-in-law, I texted him the other day and said, hey, I'm so excited about you selling your house. I'm so excited about you guys moving down here. We can't wait to see you. And I know that they're overwhelmed, so I just said, we're praying for you. And I love Oli's faith. He texted back and he said, thank you, Jeremy. It's so good to have the Lord to lean on in this time. Now, I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is to me. It's such an encouragement because I know what's going on in Oli's life. Oli is not trying to build the house of cards and then run into church on Sunday and lay in a religious platitude on top. His life is sincerely, I've known him for a long time, his life is sincerely well built on Jesus' blood and righteousness. It's so good to have the Lord to lean on in a time like that. The difference is that Jesus isn't something that's added to the top of his life, but intended to be something that's foundational in his life. One more story. I want to tell you about somebody, but I'm not going to tell you his name because it's not my story to really tell. But this young man, I met him about 4 years ago when he was about 24 years old. And at that time, he had 5 kids by 4 different women. And at 24 years old, 5 kids by 4 different women. And when I met him, he was just about a week or a week and a half clean of a lifelong addiction to heroin. His life was a mess. I mean, his parents started smoking pot with him when he was 9. By the time he was 11, he was using real hard drugs, and his life was a mess, completely addicted to heroin. And when I talked to him the very first time, we were sat in the group at Celebrate Recovery, and he told me, I can't imagine how I could ever be a productive member of society. His words burned into my brain. I remember the feeling of how that must be overwhelming to him. But some time went on and he worked the steps and he leaned into and he moved this idea of Jesus from this outside thing that was like, I don't see how that's going to happen, because the pain I'm experiencing out there does not match the power of what you're saying in that verse. And that doesn't make any sense to me. But over time, I watched as he moved Jesus from the top to the bottom. He made it not something that he added on to his life. He moved it to a place where it's foundational in his life. A few years later, he's clean for several years, and I had the opportunity to do his wedding to his new bride and welcome after that their daughter into this world. I did their wedding in my backyard. It was one of my favorite things to do. It was one of my best stories. Why? Because he'd moved Jesus from the top, just kind of added on whenever it was convenient, to the bottom. It was becoming a foundational piece. It reminds me of this passage in Matthew chapter 7 where Jesus is talking and he says this about the foundation of our life. He says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes and the torrents and the floodwaters rise and the wind beat against the house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. So here's the question, right? We now know what they have that we don't have. When they experience the pain out there, but they still see the power of those statements, we know that they have something that maybe we don't always have. But how is it that you and I get Jesus from the top religious platitude that we kind of put on top of our life to the base, to the foundation of our life? Well, I think that there's a lot to that, but I can give you one small step in the right direction. How is it that we move Jesus to a foundational place in our life beyond just showing up at Easter and going home? I'll tell you this. It's really based on the first law of motion. You know the first law of motion. It's the inertia motion. And you know this because it's easier to keep taking a nap than it was to get up, right? Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. It's really a quite simple principle. And the same thing's true of our spiritual inertia. It's easier to keep doing what you're already doing, right? I mean, once you do something, it's easier to keep doing it than it is to start doing it. So start taking next steps. Moving forward, taking next steps in your relationship, moving forward and taking a next step toward Jesus is what brings up spiritual inertia in our life. We'll be able to move forward and placing our faith. He doesn't move from the top to the bottom, to the foundation places in our life all at once. He moves there slowly. We begin to build more things on top of Jesus instead of going to church and adding on this religious platitude. So maybe you need to just say, hey, listen, I want to lean in a little bit more. I'm going to keep doing what I'm already doing. You're already here today, right? Way to go. That's a big deal. You showed up today. Show up next week. It's easier to keep doing what you're already doing. So maybe lean in and do that. Maybe you just lean into whatever you're already doing, and start doing something new. Once you start it, just keep doing it. Build spiritual inertia. But here's the deal. Jesus needs to be the foundation of our life. I love a story, don't you? I mean, I love to watch stories. I love to hear well-told stories. I love to hear stories of people that are experiencing stuff. I like to watch a great movie or read a good book and engage in a story. We love stories. We're wired for it. We love them all. But here's the problem. We love stories that end well, don't we? We love stories where the hero gets the girl or the big circumstances overcome. But then we don't like stories that don't end well, right? Like, for instance, if you've ever seen My Dog Skip or Titanic, or maybe you've not seen either one of those, and I'm going to blow the ending for both of them if you haven't seen them already, but in My Dog Skip, the dog dies. In Titanic, everybody dies, right? So don't bother watching them because it's terrible. Who wants to watch a story where the hero dies at the end? It doesn't make any sense. But here's the thing that I love about Easter. Easter isn't a story where the thing is overcome by some circumstance. Easter isn't a story where the hero dies. Easter is a story where death dies. where Jesus conquers sin and death. And he gives up his life to do it. He literally takes the keys to hell, and victory over sin and death. Death has no sting, because at the end of our story, death is who dies. So here's the question. When you're going through your bitter custody battle, when you're struggling through nursing your addiction or caring for somebody who's nursing theirs, the next time you flip the news on and the overwhelming nature of what's going on in the world just swings over you, or you're struggling to eke out a living with meager resources, or you're working through the panic of what your kids are choosing to do, whatever it is that you're going through, understand something. That moving Jesus from the top, some religious platitude that we add on the top, to the foundation of our life is just a series of us moving and building our faith on the truth that at the end of our story, the hero doesn't die. Death is what dies. So when you ask that question, why would he fail me now? He's done so much, right? He's already done so many things in my life. We're experiencing it true. So what makes me think that he won't fail me now? He won't.
Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. And I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. So I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength, 'cause I build my life on Jesus. And he's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. No, he won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause he's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. No, he won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. No, no.
Self-harm, cyber is up 90% nationally in March. Outline their travel spread and almost
102,000 new COVID-19 cases. That was just confirmed yesterday. That is the first time the United States reached six figures in one day, making it the highest amount of cases in the U.S.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the city is being reduced to ashes. Emergent Technology and Neuberger outlined the credible threat and issued what she called a call to action.
Insurance claims for intentional self-harm among people 13 to 18 was up 90% nationally in March compared to the year before, and almost 100% in April.
Tragically, more than 50 people are feared dead after 24 tornadoes ripped through the central U.S. overnight, leaving a trail of catastrophic destruction in their wake.
A state of emergency has been declared in western Kentucky, and the National Guard is being mobilized to help first responders.
Rain came and wind blew, but my house was built on you, and I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Rain came and wind blew, but my house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Rain came and wind blew, but my house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. I'm gonna make it through. 'Cause I'm standing strong on you. Yeah, I'm gonna make it through. 'Cause my house was built on you. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. When everything around me is shaking, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. 'Cause he's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. No, he won't. See, he won't fail.